Welcome to another episode of Israel in Asia. Welcome to another episode of Israel in Asia. Today we're going to be talking about the coolie slave trade. The coolie slave trade. Coolie is another pronoun of slaves that were shipped from China and they were called coolies. So let's go into it. It should be real short and we're just going to figure out who are these Chinese coolie slave trade. That's what they're called. But who are they really? That's confirmed. Chinese coolies. So here we have a book about the Chinese slave trade of the coolies in China. And the top table on the first page shows the average price for coolies and slaves sent from 1846 to 1875. We have a comparison. Check that out. A comparison between African slaves and Chinese coolies. Why would they be comparing these two? African slaves and Chinese coolies. So now we're going to try to bring this in on Africans were slaved and traded on ships. Chinese coolies were traded and sold on ships. Interesting. Let's confirm. Now, let's go to the bottom of the page and let's read the information about this time frame. It says from 1847 to 1857, coolie trafficking was dominated by the British, the Polish, and the Spanish. Interesting. Same people that implemented the slave trade in Africa and Europe. Eventually, a vast number of Europeans and American ships also partook in the lucrative process by investing in providing transportation. Ships hauled from 12 European states, England, Spain, France, Denmark, Holland, Portugal, Germany, Austria, Italy, Norway, Russia, Belgium, and the United States. The primary trafficking of Chinese coolies were the British, Portuguese, Spanish, French, American, and Dutch. Edomites. All Edomites are trading these guys. No surprise, these traffics were the same top 6 leaders in the trafficking of who? African slaves. The French and the Spanish led in total numbers of coolie transported to where? To Cuba. In the number of coolie ships. Meanwhile, the British were policing the African slave trade, but sent the third highest numbers of coolie ships to Cuba. And the fourth highest numbers of coolie ships were brought under the American flag. So here you have a rundown on table 3 of all the Chinese imports that was shipped from different continents into where? Cuba. Now I don't have my old slide and I forgot right now. One of the tribes in Cuba they are claiming, I think, is Manasseh, and it's already confirmed that Manasseh did go into Cuba, but it's also confirmed that Manasseh is on the Southeast Asia side of the world as well, and it was also confirmed that Manasseh went into China. But I'm just speculating right now. I have no proof, but let's take the content and the information that we're providing to make sure it's sealed that these were not Chinese people. These were not Chinese. Now, for some reason, don't know why, but American had to turn this cheek and say, you know what? We don't want these slaves. Send them into Cuba. We don't want them in America, because there was a policy that was provided in the U.S. Code Act that was prohibiting coolie slaves. Let's read it. Approved in February 19, 1862. An act to prohibit the coolie trade by American citizens in American vessels. Be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that no citizen or citizens of the United States or foreign coming in and residing within the same shall for himself or for any other person whatsoever, either as master, factor, owner, or otherwise builder, equip, and otherwise prepared any ships or vessel, in any steamships or steam vessels registered, enrolled, and licensed in the United States, and or any port within the same for the purpose of procuring from China or from any port or any place therein, or from any other ports or place, the inhabitants or subjects of China, known as coolies, to be transported to any foreign country, port, or place wherever to be dispersed or sold or transferred for any terms of years or for any time wherever as servants or apprentices, or to be held to serve or labor. If any ship or vessel steam of. So for some reason, the Americans said, we don't want these slaves. We want the African slaves. Pretty much that's what happened. America said, we take the Africans, you guys can take these guys. You can take the coolies. So they hand them over to Cuba, but also these coolies, that's just another name for that they gave. These are also called the Kunlun slaves. I will confirm that. This is in another presentation talking about the Kunlun slaves from Macau. We're going to prove that. Let's use the information to confirm. So I said earlier, these coolies, were they Asian? Were they even Chinese? Because they said Chinese coolies. Landmass does not define us. Let me articulate that again. Landmass do not define us. When somebody say you're African American, that means you just happen to be a person born and raised in America, but you're not American. If you're born in Cuba, you say, oh, I'm Cuban, but you're born in Cuba, but who are you really? Landmass does not define us. So when they put coolie, coolie is a pronoun, but when they say Chinese coolie, that just means they came from China. This is a Wikipedia. Look it up yourself. Coolie is an offensive term used for lower wage laborers, typically of South Asians or East Asians descent. So the word coolie was first used in the 1600s by European trading across Asia, and by the 1800s would refer to immigrant Indian indentured laborers. Indian, it doesn't say China this time. And by 19th century, during the Dutch colonial era, the term would gain a new definition of systematic transportation employment of Asian laborers via employer contract or on sugar plantations that had been formerly worked by enslaved Africans. Okay, now I'm going to skip this other paragraph. I'm going to go down to the one that's highlighted. The word originated in the 1700s Indian subcontinent and meant day laborers, but since the 20th century, the word was used in Rod, India, to refer to importers at rail stations. The term differs from the word Dougla, which would refer to people of mixed African and Indian descent. Let me say that one more time. Which refer to people of mixed African and Indian ancestries. Africa, make sure I read that right. Mixed African and Indian ancestry. That's what I'm reading, but I said Chinese earlier. Coolies is instead used to refer to people of full-blooded Indian descent whom ancestors migrated to the British former colonies of Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. Now I am confused. So why do they call them Chinese? Like I said earlier, that's just mean they came from there. But this is telling you that no, these guys were African and Indian descent, just happened to be in China. So the Chinese coolie trade from China were not Chinese at all. So They were not Chinese at all. Now, let's just use a few. I'm not touching much biblical text today, but I will use these two scriptures to confirm everything I'm saying. And if you watch the other videos, the Isles of Shunem, those videos will confirm that there were Israelites in Asia, that was in Shunem, that was in China, that ultimately got sent to the Isles or sent to other nations. This particular presentation is just talking about the coolies, the Chinese coolies that were shipped into Cuba. So there was a huge slave trade, and you have the dates and the times. You go back and go back from the beginning and look at the numbers of people that were sent from China into Cuba. But the land of Shunem, or China, which is a book, the book is confirming the land of Shunem is where? China. That's the land of Shunem. So let's read Isaiah 49:12. Behold, these shall come from the land from afar, and lo, these from the north and from the west, and these from the land of Shunem, from the land of China. So they're saying that the slave trade will come from the land of China. There will be a slave trade from China, particularly Macau, that will go into Southeast Asia, which we got a presentation on that one. But this particular one is talking to those that came from the land of Shunem that went into Cuba. Yeah, Cuba. So those that call, oh, the Cuba is one of the 12 tribes. You know, some of those brothers came from China. Just want to let you know. Make sure you get your notes. So guess what? If they are the tribe you say they are, that means some people that went into Southeast Asia from that same land are possibly the same tribe. Just speculating. I don't know for sure, but if you're going to say one place, you got to make sure you're consistent with your people in the landmass that you're saying these people are. If they are saying these people are this people, and those guys that came from China are those people too, that were sold into ships are the same people, well, I guess you're saying they're the same people then. Hey. Or just go with the fact that they're probably Israelites. Let's just stick with that. Now, this is your confirmation that these are not Chinese. You can Google it, you can look it up. Moab is Chinese. The Moabites are Chinese. It says, Moab have been at ease from his youth, and he hath settled on his lee, and have not been empty from vessel to vessel. We just read that earlier about the vessels, the ships, the American ships, the European ships, the vessels from different countries, and not, Americans say, oh, we don't want these guys. It's saying here that they have not been empty from vessel to vessel, neither have they gone into captivity. The Chinese have never been gone into captivity. So if they were Chinese coolies, they were not Chinese. And where I proved it from the one Google text saying that they were African and Indian descent, and now we're confirming it that Chinese never got sold according to scripture, if you believe in the Bible. If you don't believe in the Bible, this presentation is not for you. It's only for those that believe in the Bible. So they never went into captivity. Therefore, his taste remains in him, and his scent is not changed. He still is a Moabite, and he still hates us. That's also why he sold us into Cuba and Southeast Asia. Check that out. And in that book, you can guys see it. I'm not going to read the book. You read it if you want to. But you see the word Jews also have been in where? China for many years. So now we narrowed it down even more. We went from they're not Chinese, they're African and Indian descent. China never got sold into slavery. Israel be sent from land of Shunem. And we got Jews being in China. So, were those Jews? Were those Israelites? I think so. Now, just one last two books. Basically, colonies of Jews, I believe, was discovered in Hana in the province in Joints in Shantung by the Jesuits about 200 years ago. Where? In China. In China. And like I said, I'm not going to read this book too, but you got Jews over here. The Christianity is among the Jews within China. Kung Feng. It says have since inserted that it was at Kaifeng is in China, a town on the Yellow River in the capital of Henan, that the Jesuits made this discovery of who? The Chinese Jews. I'm not going to read the whole thing, like I said. I'm just going to focus on the fact. I'm going to keep this short because my point is the coolie slave trade were the slave trade of who? It wasn't Chinese, but it was, and we could say it was possibly people with Indian descent and African descent. And if it was people of Indian descent, African descent, was Israelites mixed with the Indians and the Africans? Absolutely. And guess what? We got confirmation that the Jews were there. Now this book over here, the Nomads, the worst of them all was the mad burning of the Russian in Mongolia. He killed every Jew he could find, shot any other Russians he could throw might not be entirely one of his own men, and maintained discipline among his troops, would pick out men here and there in the ranks and have them shot, just to encourage others. He also had insane dreams uniting Mongolians, Tibetans, and Manchurians, anybody who was not Russian, not Chinese, since he himself was a both not Russian, to sweep the world with a conquest more devastating than the wildest extremists attributes, not always correctly, to Genghis Khan. So this is during the Mongolian dynasty. But during the Mongolian dynasty, were there Jews in that time frame? Yes, they were. There was a Jewish Mongolian troop under Genghis Khan at the time, actually fighting with them if they didn't kill them. So bottom line is, the coolie slave trade were more likely the prophecies of Deuteronomy 28, once again, going into Cuba. I hope you appreciate this information and utilize it for whatever reasons you think you need to. Until then, all praises to the Most High.